we can start because I see now all the paper of the session. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maurizio Leotta. I'm assistant professor at the University of Genoa in Italy. Today I will chair, as Guglielmo introduced me, this session of IST. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the conference organizers. And this session of the conference in particular is about test generation, and we have 3 papers. I gently ask the participant, let's say, to write their question during each paper presentation on the chat so that the presenters can easily answer at the end of the presentation. And it's my pleasure to introduce our first paper today, that is testing non-testable program using association rules. And now I try to start this paper, the video presentation of this paper, if I found the controls. So, if I found the control, because I don't find them now.
Maurizio, if you would like, I can start the...
Okay. Yeah, it's better
I
because I don't see the
Okay.
controls. Okay.
Okay, I try to start the paper for you. Maurizio, Maurizio, sorry, I cannot hear you. I don't know if the others can.
Not okay, enable the microphone. Now probably you can hear me. Okay, Breno, since there are no questions now, I have one for you. What about apply armed testing to, let's say, I think machine learning based software systems that are probably an example of not testable programs? And in that particular context, can be, for instance, reasonable to extract association rules from the training sets instead of from the execution of the system. Does it make any sense for you?
So hi Mauricio. So thank you for your question. So this is a excellent question, and actually it took already some of our time reflecting a bit on that. It was not the primary use case we considered, but after some discussions, we, let's say, put in our list of things to try, and it should go exactly in the direction of you are saying, more or less, that we should try to find or derive those relations that this input usually always go to that output. So it's some sort of for the classification problem in particular. So if we take machine learning as a whole, it would be very complicated. If we consider the particular cases of supervised learning, for example, for which we know the labels, classification in particular, then we could try something on this direction. We evaluated the sets of inputs and we say, this kind of input always go to that classification. And if something goes on a different direction, we could say, hey, this is probably a suspicious output of this classifier, of this decision tree, for example. But it's something that we haven't tried yet. So it's in our to-do list.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. No, probably no other question from the audience. I don't know if we can wait just a few seconds if there are other questions, or if there are no questions, we can probably, so if we have no other question, I think we can thank the speaker very much. Thank you, Breno, for your talk. And we can move with the second paper that is on the feasibility and challenges of synthesizing executable espresso test. I start the second Okay, so thank you for the very nice, interesting presentation. We have many questions from the chat. The first is the first research question: are the test suite size in both cases the same? Do you have any insights on why mate resulted in an higher coverage?
Hi, thank you very much, Mauricio. Can you hear me well?
Yeah,
Great, thank
perfectly.
you. Thank you, Bao, for the question. So in research question one, we compare the coverage for the sequence during exploration and then the coverage after the espresso test synthesizing. And so we saw that the coverage from the espresso test was a bit lower, and the insight. So we believe that and this is addressed in research question two, I think. We believe that the coverage was lower because there was at least at least one failing action in each espresso test on average. So these failing actions are very disruptive for the execution of the espresso test. And this leads to certain fragility of the test cases, of the synthesized espresso test cases. So if you have on average one or I think in the paper we reported 25% of failing actions on average. Um, so this means that you can have a great part of the test case of the espresso test case that ends up being not executed because you actually fail. If you have a failing action at the beginning of the test, then you end up in a different UI state than what was intended, and then all of the actions afterwards are actually causing an exception. Uh, so that's our insight for the difference in coverage for research question one.
Okay.
Um,
Then there is another question from Bao that is, do
mhm.
we have any widget generated dynamically from data in our system under test, such as button links generated from a database? And how would the widget disambiguation study change with such the dynamic system under test?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you very much. So basically, I think there are two different types of dynamically generated widgets. You have the ones that are flaky and the ones that are not flaky. So if the dynamically generated widget is, let's say, programmatically generated, but it's deterministic, then the exploration we believe can be translated with no problem because you read the properties of the widget at runtime. So it does not matter in principle if it was dynamically generated or if it was defined in an XML file. So in that sense, it does not matter for the translation. But we had some cases with some subjects that they had dynamically generated widget, but they came from data, for example, from web services. Let's say, for example, the currency rate of an exchange. So I don't know, Bitcoin currency exchange rate. Such value changes, of course, minute by minute, hour by hour. So that widget is also dynamically generated, but it's using a value that also changes over time. So when during the exploration you read the display text on the widget, you are going to read the value, and if you later try to execute the synthesized espresso test after translation, um, it might be the case that the application understand and the application under test then shows a different value. So you are trying to target a view that shows, I don't know, 1.05 in a button, and then the application says 1.06. Then the whole test is doomed, because this person test can no longer find the view matcher that you build for a certain widget is no longer being found by Espresso on the screen. So in that sense, widgets generated dynamically can be a problem, but not always. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, it can answer the question. For that, it's that like so do you think that like using ID is always a good idea to identify the question the widgets, right? Sometimes, like for example, that's such the generated widgets, right? You only care about, like for example, the first one in the list, right? Then you use index for something like that. So in that scale, how it would change the problem here?
Well, yeah, it's actually a problem, right? Because the resource ID, which you might want it to be unique, but it is actually not unique, because, for example, you can have many rows in a list, and they are all generated from the same XML file. So Android allows you to have repeating resource IDs. So you cannot only rely on the resource ID. And then for the index in the list, that can work sometimes, but some other times it doesn't work, because the list, so for example, some very used classes in Android are the recycle list view, for example. And what it does is if you do not see an item on the screen, then it is lost. So the garbage collector reclaims the widgets that are not seen on the screen. And when you gather the information for that screen, the index of the items on the list changes while you scroll. So that's a problem for
my point is like for example, from testing perspective, right? We don't even care about like what item it has. We only care about like maybe the first item only in the list, right? Then that should be enough. Maybe
you're right. Maybe there is a way to abstract the instead of being so precise, try to relax the constraints over the widget and say just pick one item. But you need to take into account that sadly, Espresso does not like very much raises an exception for view matchers that target more than one view. So maybe, as you were saying, you can say target the view with index 0, and I don't care if it's exactly the one I was looking for, but it's going to have to do. So yeah, that might be a possible heuristic to try to mitigate the problem. Just use one representative from the items of a list. That's very interesting. We should try that out.
Maybe that problem you will see more on web UI, for example, like not like in Android or something. Desktop application. Thank you. Thank you for answering.
Thank you very much for the question.
Okay. Any other question from the audience? I see no on the chat. So if we have no more questions, thank you, Ivan, very much for the interesting talk. And
thank you, Maurizio.
And now we can move to our last paper for this session, that is Crow Label, Computing Natural Language Labels for User Interface Test Cases. So I start the last paper video. Okay, so thank you very much for the very nice and interesting presentation. We have one question in the chat. Can you hear us, you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So from the chat is in the case of Dime Shift and phonics, both have just one path, we have seen from the table. Does it mean that only one kind of interaction is possible in that cases?
Thank you for the question. I think one pass means one test case, and we can see that the number of states and the number of edges is not one. So this means that there are multiple different interactions, but because of the configuration or setting of the cardex, there is also only one test case generated. So if we say the kind of interactions, then there are multiple edges, so there are still multiple kinds of interactions.
Okay. Okay. So another question from the chat is how do you see labels generated for user interface test cases different from unit tests?
I think we still manually label the unit tests and then use our manual label compared with the generated label.
Okay, I have one question. That is, but crawl Ajax, let's say, is mandatory to create the initial test to label for your tool, or is it possible to provide to your tool like also existing test suites, for instance, to label?
Do you mean that can we try to feed all kinds of UI tests to our tool and generate?
Yeah. For instance, if there is, I don't know, an existing end-to-end test and we want to label using your approach, is it possible, or it is necessary to start with the crawl Ajax and generate?
Right, we can feed any generated testing to our tool. We just use Cardex generated tests as a example.
Okay, there is another question in the chat that is how the framework performs in case of implementation that support dynamic multi-language customization of the user interface. Okay.
I think we did not check how different frameworks perform differently. So I think this may be
but maybe the problem here is that we can have different labels. Guglielmo, you mean something like that we can have different labels associated with the same step because there are multiple.
Maybe yes, you cannot really trust on the semantic of the label because the label may depend, may be abstract and depending will be instantiated according to the different language setup you choose.
Yeah. You have not experimented this kind of application, right? You?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other question? Okay, I have another one that is the approach that you proposed work only for, let's say, unstructured test scripts, or also you can provide an input test suite where the group of action are, let's say, grouped or clustered in reusable functions like happens, for instance, when you adopt the page object pattern or something like that.
Could you say that again?
The idea is that I think that the tests generated by crawl Ajax are, in certain sense, a list of action. Okay, simple list of actions. But usually when you work with the, I don't know, complex end-to-end test, you organize the code using different design patterns, such as the page object that simply provides several functions that you can reuse in your test. In that case, you can use your tool to label also this kind of code, or for now you have only tried on, let's say, the commands, the action created by Ajax, so without a particular structure, let's say.
Oh, thank you for the question. I think currently we only focus on the actions on the clickable itself, and we do not explore some other kinds of.
Okay. So any other question? From the chat, I see no more question. So thanks again you for the interesting talk. I would like to thank again our speakers, all the speakers, for their very interesting, stimulating contributions, and the participants for the important discussion. I think that these conclude this first session, or today's session of the work of the conference. And so, Guglielmo, I don't know if you want to add something. There is a black.
Yeah, there is a black. I would like to thank you, Maurizio, for your effort and your experience also. And so let's have the coffee break, and just after the coffee break, we will come back with the session number 5, regression testing and debugging. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. See you later.